Welcome to Lecture 5. The rise of English as a global language has changed the foundations of how the language is taught and learned. The term Global English's language teaching, Gelt, was first established as a new approach to teaching English, founded on theoretical notions from Global English's research. Gelt is an answer to calls for an epistemic break in English language teaching, which views current practices as ill-fitting for teaching English as a global lingua franca. I begin in this lecture by exploring the theoretical underpinnings of Gelt and rationalise a need for a new approach to teaching English in the 21st century. I outline the 6 proposals for change in English language teaching practices that emerged from research in the field in the early 2000s, upon which Gelt was established. Finally, I outline the Gelt framework. In addition to having implications for teaching the English language, Global English's research and Gelt also have implications for teaching in English in EMI settings. The need for change in English language teaching has attracted the attention of a growing number of scholars within the field of Global Englishes. We have entire books on the topic, an increased number of articles in language teaching journals within the field of English language teaching. And the first part of the Routledge Handbook of English Language Teaching includes chapters now on World Englishes and ELF, for example. Some TESOL practitioner texts also refer to English as a lingua franca as a phenomenon, and some also to World Englishes and ELF research. Such publications raise a number of questions for TESOL practitioners and highlight that both the needs of learners and the goals of ELT have changed. Global English's language teaching stems from calls within applied linguistics for a paradigm shift. Calls for change have been grouped under 6 broad proposals referred to as the Gelt proposals. These include increasing exposure to both World Englishes and ELF in language curricula, emphasising respect for multilingualism, raising awareness of ELF strategies, emphasising respect for diverse culture and identity, and changing English teacher hiring practices. In terms of the first proposal, scholars have long lobbied for more accurate representation of variation in English in language learning contexts. This view has also extended to language educationalists such as Mackay, who has argued that learners need to comprehend different varieties so that they are better prepared to deal with English interactions in international contexts. In terms of developing respect for multilingualism, research is showing that knowledge of English only is not enough to fully function in global contexts. Applied linguistics researchers have long been strong advocates of multilingualism, which extends into the English language classroom. Movements in translanguaging research and the multilingual turn in SLA have further highlighted the importance of multilingualism and have challenged the monolingual orientations that underpin much research and practice. Gelt is sensitive to the fact that the ability to use other languages alongside English creates authentic contexts similar to possible future communities of practice in which they are likely to use English alongside other languages. The third Gelt proposal emphasises the importance of raising learners' awareness of how English is used as a global language in order for them to develop an accurate understanding of how they may use the language in the future. In order to function in these emerging global contexts, it has also become increasingly clear that learners must develop the strategies needed to adapt to different communities of language users, which forms the fourth Gelt proposal. The fifth proposal centres on the need to respect cultural differences and to widen the lens of what an English-using culture is. The final Gelt proposal calls for a change in teacher recruitment and training to move away from concepts of native English speakers as being experts to professional English teachers. In considering that so-called non-native English-speaking teachers make up the majority of the profession, it has been noted that on a global level, the English language teaching profession is perhaps the world's only occupation in which the majority faces discrimination. Even though applied linguists and language educationalists seem to agree that change is necessary, until recently, a concrete plan of innovation that can be implemented into practice has been lacking. This has led to widespread observations of a theory-practice divide, which Gelt aims to address. The Gelt framework provides a usable framework for research purposes and to inform curriculum innovation. It aims to provide a means to answer calls for change by consolidating interconnected themes in a reader-friendly format and to enable practitioners to evaluate and design curricula, drawing attention to different aspects. Specifically, in Gelt, the target interlocutors are not necessarily native English speakers. Lingua-cultural norms are ad hoc and negotiated, as opposed to being fixed. Goals and objectives are mutual intelligibility and understanding, as opposed to achieving native speaker proficiency. There is a focus on ELF strategies, accommodation for example, not on imitating the native English speaker. Gelt is a student-centred perspective of English language teaching. It's not a prescriptive model, and students' needs are central. It is important to note that this vision for change in English language teaching does not suggest that we need to abandon previous practices entirely. Gelt is an ideology which can be used to inform rather than direct teaching in the 21st century. It should not be seen as an alternative to current approaches used to teach English, but as a way to inform these approaches. While Gelt was introduced to inform the practice of teaching English, it is also relevant for teaching in English, that is, for EMI contexts, the focus of the next 4 lectures. As I noted in EA3, EMI is under-researched and there have been recent calls for an examination of the challenges faced by students in EMI contexts. A Gelt perspective can add to this research agenda by calling for more research on the E in EMI. Questions that arise, and some of which are explored in subsequent lectures, include questions like, what English is used in EMI? Is there an opportunity to examine language variation and ELF usage in EMI settings? How is English being used alongside other local languages? Is there an opportunity to explore fluidity and translanguaging in EMI? How can the English language curriculum better prepare students to use English as an academic lingua franca? How is both English and content knowledge assessed? And how should staff and students be supported in EMI programmes? These are ambitious questions that cannot be answered by a single study, but they do create an opportunity for context-specific case studies in order to fully comprehend the impact of EMI on language development through a global English's lens. Within a Gelt perspective, the owners of English are seen as being as fluid as the language they speak, moving beyond outdated notions that geographic borders and nation-based states contain languages and speakers. Again, this has implications for EMI settings, and EMI settings are increasingly international. Here, students will be exposed to the use of translanguaging and various academic norms in educational cultures. Students on EMI programmes, whatever their nationality or English proficiency level, require support. This is further complicated by the internationalised nature of the EMI classroom, and as Tsuneyoshi reports, in Japan, domestic students feel less able to keep up in EMI classes if there is a mixed domestic and international student body. The norms which underpin language teaching are perhaps the most resistant to change, as they are grounded in standard language ideology that a standard or a correct version of the language actually exists. This also applies to academic norms in EMI settings, and we may ask questions such as, why are we adhering to Western academic norms in a program based in Japan, for example? Gelt concurs with opinions that static views of language are problematic, and in addition to promoting flexible use of the language, it also concurs with opinions that switching into English should not necessarily mean westernizing the classroom. In order to reflect global ownership of the language, Gelt encourages the positioning of qualified expert users of the English language as good role models for learners. While this may prove difficult due to the prevalence of standard language ideology, initial research shows a raised awareness of the value of expert users as role models and teachers. In my own study, I aim to explore the effects of hiring non-Japanese teaching assistants for an EMI business program in Japan, based on their perceived value as both role models of expert ELF users, for example having used English in diverse contexts, and having knowledge of business concepts. Questionnaire data from the Japanese students suggested that they valued qualities in the assistants which were not connected to linguistic knowledge, but their ability to engage with students, explain key concepts, and be approachable to their peers. This study also saw no statistically significant differences between reported value of the assistant and perceived nativeness. Nevertheless, while making an argument for non-native speakers as authentic role models, I'm not advocating that non-native speakers necessarily make better teachers. What I would argue is that nativeness is inherently a poor criteria on which to judge a teacher's ability to teach, and this also applies to hiring procedures for EMI settings. So that concludes Lecture 5, where we've explored the pedagogical implications of Global English's research for both teaching English as a subject and also teaching in English. Global English's language teaching was established as a new approach to teaching English to ensure that the 21st century English language classroom is reflective of how the language functions today as a global lingua franca, and this has a number of implications for EMI settings to be explored in further lectures. Thank you very much for watching.